Okay. All right. So next, we've talked about the wall. We've talked about the wall hung. Next, I want to talk about is the floor combi and heat only. And it's got some unique differences that a lot of you guys are doing a lot of wall hung. This floor boiler has a lot of benefits to it. So we're going to talk about that first. So we make the combi and the heat only, 199,000 only for this product for the floor, both natural and propane. Okay. On the combi, it's the industry leader floor boiler, giving you 5.2 GPM at a 70-degree rise. And then again, we also have the heating only models. These are 10-to-1 turn down in modulation. Again, we use a lot of the same components. The stainless steel fire tube heat exchanger. Now we refer to it as a built-in low loss header, and I'll explain what that is and how that works. And that's your shell and tube design on the potable domestic coil. 10-to-1 turn down, again, industry leader on the GPM. All the piping connections to this are right off the top, okay? A lot of your wall hungs, what do you do with that space underneath them, right? You're creating primary, secondary manifold. What are you doing with it? There's nothing else under there, right? So again, the floor boiler, everything's right off the top. Here in the US, most cases, we're going up. We're in a basement, we're going up. On it, if you take a wall hung and you mount it, you get primary, secondary, where's your piping going? Straight back up, okay? So everything's right off the top with venting, gas, electric, etc. We give you multiple venting options, and now we offer the domestic recirc on the combi models, okay? So this is on the floor, and we have that air intake screen. Now, the air intake screen became available on the Generation 2. So anything ordered now, brand new, will have this air intake screen. So I'll pass this around. John took it out of the boiler for us. Again, it's external of the cabinet. So right here on the wall and right here on the floor. All right. Facing left side, 2 Phillips head screws, and now you can get out and clean that. So example, PVC shavings, cottonwood season, grass clippings, bugs, you name it, will all be collected there instead of down inside your burners. All right. We also give you 3 large service access panels. We provide you with an approved thermostatic mixing valve. So the wall hung has a built-in mixing valve. This is external of the cabinet, and I'll explain why when we get to it. A lot of times you're putting condensate pumps, right, on these boilers. Well, we give you space right in the cabinet for the condensate pump. So you can put that right in the cabinet, and we even have the outlet right there for you, so you can plug it right in instead of running that cord out. So, I think
outlet pump only. Don't plug your salt on into it. Don't plug your shop back into it. Do it hand use.
Yeah. Yep. It's
turn the blower off for you.
It's designed for just the condensate pump. Okay. So there's no diverter valve. That diverter valve is a 3-way valve. I'm sorry, diverter valve. So I'm in a hydronic heating mode, right? And my wife just turned on the faucet to rinse her coffee cup. What happens? The boiler has to shut off. Diverter valve goes to domestic mode. Now you got to go through that quick pre-purge and refire the heater, okay? If she's only rinsing the coffee cup for 30 seconds. She shuts off that faucet. If I still have a heating demand, I now have to drive that back to the full open position. So I'm going to shut off the heat, drive it back to full open, refire the heater, go through the whole pre-purge. I had 5 boys. Now, growing up, right, they're all older now because I'm an old man, but there were 7 of us in the house. I could have seen 160 domestic cycles from domestic and hydronic in the middle of the winter. All right. So with this, there's no diverter valve. So what that's doing, it's allowing us to provide heat and hot water simultaneously. Okay. So no diverter valve. And we have built-in supply and return sensors. No system sensors required. copper and stainless on all of the domestic components. We even give you the handles to lift this into position, okay? And we give you 3 large service access panels, left side, right side, and bottom right. That bottom right is where you can have your access for your condensate pump. If you are not putting a condensate pump in the cabinet, which a lot of guys in a larger basement want to leave it external, right, outside so they can clean it or get to it, elevate that boiler up on pads. Why? Because we have a built-in condensate trap inside the cabinet. And what happens is where you're going to come out, it comes out on the bottom, and then you have to take it up into the condensate pump. So you're double trapping it. So just elevate that if you're using an external pump. Does that make sense? And there's also leveling links. So we give you 3 large service access panels. There are 2 latches right on the top. And you lift those latches and take that panel right out of position, and there it is, okay? So components are all going to be the same. Easy to use display right there in the top. And again, we have videos on all of this, how to get into setup modes and diagnostic modes and programming and outdoor reset, etc. So simple programming, demand status, and error codes, all right? And we also have the diagnostic codes. We still have that built-in low water cutoff right there inside that cabinet. And again, that's auto reset. So in here in New York, where you're required to have the external one, keep that in mind. So your terminal strip is right here, front facing. So here we have on the 3 left, don't forget that on-off rocker switch, which is right there. This is showing the combi model. And so line voltage coming in on your first 3 terminals. You also have the central heat pump and a DHW pump, okay? And then your terminals here, we give you a 24 volts. There was another gentleman that's sitting over here earlier. We give you 24 volts for the external low water cutoff, all right? And then you'll have your additional low water cutoff terminals here for that, okay? That only has a 2.5 amp fuse on it as well, all right? So that's strictly to power that low water cutoff, all right? Yeah.
That is a 20 VA transformer.
Yeah.
It's not a standard 20 VA transformer.
Yeah.
Very small.
Yep. Yeah, what Kenny brought up was the VA transformer on these products. It's a little 20 VA transformer. It's not a 40 or 60, and so only be utilizing that for that low water cutoff.
So don't put 3-zone valve on it.
No, absolutely no. Don't do your zone panels or anything else on it, or what have you, fan in the cans or all of that. The low water cutoff additional terminals on this terminal strip, where you guys are required to also have maybe a manual high limit out in the system, you can wire those in series and land it here, okay? And then you have your, so your low water cutoff, we'll talk about HS Aquastat here for even on an indirect 0 to 10 TT and OS. So I'll get into some of these other terminals in a minute when we get into the explanation. So here we're showing the heat only models. You have a low temperature zone, a standard TT zone, and we'll also have a high temp zone. Power in, system pump, low temperature pump, domestic hot water pump, okay? So that's on the heat only models. And that way you could tie in an indirect with that, your DHW pump, okay, which is here.
The low temp zone.
We're going to get into all of that, okay? Control board, again, is front facing. You're going to have your dip switches and your gas detector, okay? Dip switches are all going to be the same on that. So now this shell and tube, or this, shell and tube indirect tank, it's insulated, as you can see. And we're going to use this now as a low loss header. And understanding what a low loss header is, okay? So a low loss header, in this example, I've got my boiler pump and it's set on high speed, call that 16 gallons per minute, okay? And if my zone is equal to 16 gallons a minute, very simply, I'm going to draw out to the zone or zones. So in that example, maybe I'm running 4 pumps, all right? All right, in this example, my boiler pump is fixed at 16 gallons a minute. System pump is, now I've only got 2 zones, 2 3/4-inch zones, for example, of 4 GPM each. What happens here? So I'm pushing 16 GPM into that low loss header, and I'm pulling 16 out. And if I draw a dotted line right down the center, I'm decoupling my system loop from my boiler loop. Both are getting proper flow rate. And that's what a low loss header is. Works just like primary, secondary, okay? And there's many different low loss headers. Rath sells the Calefi low loss header. Here's a small one, okay? How many GPM, how many gallons do you guys go up to on the large sizes? 120. So, so again, the same thing that I'm showing you that's now we're utilizing that stainless steel heat exchanger for, this is it. So instead of having to put this external, it's built in the cabinet, all right? But these do work great, guys, especially on those commercial jobs. And Rath's done a great job in selling them here in New York, as well as supporting them and supporting you. In this next example, I still have 16 GPM on my boiler pump, but maybe I got 5 zones out in that system. We had a power outage or what have you, and all zones came on. What would happen? I have higher flow rate on the system in that example. All right, so this is how a low loss header works, and it's built right in. And we had talked about something called pump post purge. So at the end of my call for heat, and I'm running that pump for 30 to 60 seconds, very simply through the low loss header and back to the boiler, okay? So that's how that low loss header works. And so on the heat only models, it's an empty shell, stainless steel, all welded, no gaskets, okay, other than the connection points. But on the combi, right? So again, all flow travels through the low loss header. We're decoupling the system from the boiler loop, guaranteeing proper flow. By doing this, we no longer need primary, secondary. So you can rip out an old cast iron boiler and that replacement that was series piped. Boil, flow in, out, okay? Rip that out, you can connect this now without having to go primary, secondary. You can do either or, all right? We have the valves for it, meaning the isolation valves, which we'll talk about. And we ensure low flow velocity, minimizing the pressure drop. Now on the combi model has that domestic coil right there inside, okay? Double row. So we can use that same shell and tube, all right, as the indirect, or I'm sorry, as the low loss header and the combi domestic shell and tube design. Does that make sense? All right, and that's built all in on the floor models. And eventually we may see this on the wall hung. Probably not for a couple of years. All right, when we design something, we typically wait a couple of years before we redesign. So on the floor model, and again, it's all stainless steel welded. We're always in tank charge mode. So again, the flow for this, even on a heating demand, I'm sending heat out. So here's my heat exchanger. Here's my pump. So I'm flowing from the low loss header through the primary heat exchanger back. So that's what it's doing. So again, I'm always in tank charge mode. My system is being drawn off the top with system pumping. Does that make sense? Okay. So now also consider it's a 0-degree day and I have baseboard heat. What am I running? What am I supplying for temperature on a 0-degree day for baseboard heat? 180. So what's happening to my domestic coil? If I've been sitting running 180 for 20 minutes and I haven't had a demand for domestic, now someone gets up and turns on a shower, potentially I could be sending 180 degrees out, okay? That's why we want to make sure you have a thermostatic mixing valve installed out in the system. Does that make sense? And we'll get more into that in a few minutes. So again, that reduces cold water sandwiching, continuous delivery of 5.2 GPM at a 70-degree rise. Now we offer something with this called Smart Priority. So first combi boiler that can provide both heat and hot water simultaneously. All right. No diverter valve. And that diverter valve, I explained that at my house, you know, I'm running a zone of heat or 2 zones of heat, and someone comes in just to wash their hands. Okay, 60 seconds. That diverter valve has to shut the boiler off. Why? Because the diverter valve has to go to domestic position, and if I didn't have flow, I'd trip limit. Now, once I'm in domestic position, I got to go back through the whole pre-purge and all of that. At 30 seconds, 60 seconds, shut off the faucet. I got to shut off the boiler again and go back up. You're going to have multiple cycles. By doing it this way with no diverter valve, we can provide both heat and hot water. How does it work? It works off modulation. So hypothetically, I've got a zone of heat or 2 zones of heat running. Call it 80,000 BTUs. Okay. I got 199,000 BTU boiler. So I still have ample hot water or ample BTUs for the indirect tank. Okay. And so we can provide both. So how it works is on my modulation. If the boiler modulates to 80% of modulation, we want to control that zone pump system or that zone valves. We're going to shut that off and allow all the BTUs for the domestic. Okay. As that's catching up, modulating back down to 50%, we reintroduce this pump. Okay. And I'll explain how all that works.
Essentially, you maintain the hot water if it's an 85-degree outside.
If it's what?
It's an 85-degree outside sometimes.
What's it, 154?
Storage temp 155, 155.
Yeah.
And it's constant, so you're getting 155 out of your coil. Maintaining temperature.
Yeah, I thought it was 154, so I was a degree off.
You still have a mixed balance.
Absolutely.
Think of it like a
100%.
oil boiler with a coil. You're
Well, that's code. Just
Yeah.
put on it regardless.
Yeah.
So it's so like a low limit.
Yep.
Right. Well, like, so if there's no TT, there's no heat coil.
Mhm. Right. Yep. And all we're doing is flowing from the primary heat exchanger through the low loss header. So again, we can provide heat and hot water simultaneously, allowing you to start with central heat demand. I've got a central heat and DHW demand, maybe back to a DHW demand, all without shutting down that burner. And it's all done through modulation. Again, no motorized damper, so that means fewer ignition starts, stops, and less demand cycles, which I've already explained. Boiler pump is right there. Again, everything's front facing, very easy to service this appliance right from the front. It's a 3-speed pump, easy accessed, and we're set at speed 3 leaving the factory. We have a 110-volt outlet right inside that cabinet in the back where that access panel was. And that is for your optional neutralizer and pump kit. So you can purchase this one from us, which you put the neutralizer medium in, or you do purchase your own pump and have a neutralizer, such as what Rath sells here, which is Axiom. Thank you. Couldn't remember. It's been a while. Low point boiler drain is right there on the front as well. So if you were in a condo complex and tight room, you've got, I don't know, 2-inch clearance to left and right sides. You could put that pump inside that cabinet. And if you ever had to replace or remove that pump, obviously you're going to isolate, ball valve your boiler, drain it off, and then these are quick connects. Okay. Quick connect, take this connection off the pump, and you could slide that right out. You'd have to refill the boiler afterwards, but it is serviceable from the front. Okay. So top connections here. So we're showing the heat only. So here's our gas connection on the front left. We also have the combustion air intake. And this was the screen that I had shown you. So again, 2 Phillips head screws. Again, the homeowner can even do this. They don't need to call you up inside the cabinet where some of these customers are not very tech savvy or petrified, but they all own a Phillips head screwdriver. So they can take that right out and clean that as needed. And here's an example of a real job that I was at, and those are all the PVC shavings on the combustion air intake. All right. And that would have all ended up down inside your burner. Okay. Cottonwood season is pretty big in some other regions and areas. Example of Michigan right here, where that would end up in that burner every single year. Call that around June. Okay. So it does protect. All right. We have the outlet flue with a test port right there for your combustion analysis. And again, every manufacturer requires a combustion analysis over 85%. This is an appliance, so it does have a power cord, okay, that you would plug into a GFI outlet, okay, or GFI breaker. The outlet that's in the cabinet for that condensate pump is non-GFI. Why? Thank you. Okay, one's going to trip. So you can't have two GFIs on the same. So you're supposed to be using the power cord into a GFI or a ground fault breaker, and that way they're not tripping each other. Okay, now the whole appliance is ground faulted. Does that make sense? Now, we give you an optional condensate discharge. So hypothetically, a condo complex, I've got 0 clearance or 1-inch clearance to come to the walls or what have you. How am I going to run that condensate? I can run the condensate right up through the cabinet. Just remove that side access panel, run that up, snake it up through and right out the top, okay, for the condensate pump. We have 1.5-inch heating supply connections and 1.5-inch return connections. And right here, we're going to refer to this as a 3-in-1 brass adapter, okay? Keep in mind, we need the relief valve and the vent, right? So we give you this all in the bag or all in the box, okay? And that's what it looks like. So you've got the 3-in-1. You've got one for your air elimination and relief valve. But you guys are required here to have an external low water cutoff, right? So this plug right here, not a test plug, this plug can be removed or not installed, and you can put your low water cutoff right here and then wire it back up to your terminal strip, okay? So that's all with the boiler right there. Anything you want to add? Yeah. Anything? Okay. And front facing gauge right off the top. Now on the combi models, we have the domestic water in, okay? We also have a strainer or screen right here. So you can remove those are 2 cotter pins and remove that and clean it depending on your water content. I think your water is pretty good out here. Hypothetically, if you wanted to pull that, you're going to have ball valves on your cold water feed anyways, right? And you isolate that, open up fixture and relieve the pressure. Well, let's say that ball valve is, I don't know, 18 inches above the top of that heater. I still have water there. And if I pull that filter out, right, what happens? I'm going to get water down on the top of this cabinet. And everyone's going to be concerned you're going to get water down inside. Well, every one of these fittings are backed up with a gasket. So that's a watertight cabinet, okay? We even give you the hex fittings for the heating pipes and domestic water in and out, okay? Why? Because a lot of times you'll have guys putting those fittings in, they're cranking down with an 18-inch or 12-inch pipe wrench. What are you doing? You're twisting that pipes down inside that cabinet. So now you can back that up with a wrench, all right? And that way you're not twisting the pipe, and they're also screwed in, all right? So again, it's weather-tight cabinet, if you will. So we do have that screen or strainer for the filter, and then we have the domestic hot water out. We also give you the domestic recirc option, right? So how many guys actually have a lot of jobs with recirculation? Any? Couple of them, but it's not a huge percentage. Is that fair to say? 20%, 10%? Okay. We give you some options here of how to control that. So on the domestic recirc, again, it's 3/4 inch, and we do not provide the pump. You would provide the bronze pump. And you have some options here. You could buy the resistance sensor or surface mounted sensor for that pipe. You can use a mechanical on-off aquastat for DHW, or we have built-in time right on the program of the display, okay? An example of that is 20 minutes on, 40 minutes off. You can program that. So it's every hour it's running. You're not going to set this that at 6 a.m. to 6:45. It's not done by that kind of clock. It's every hour you pick the time, how much time you want that recirc to run. Okay. So those are your three options.
Can you take pressure off the water heat exchanger, like below that? Like say I got a leak at that thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
On the domestic?
No, domestic, no.
No.
Oh, there's not.
No.
You can't take pressure below it.
Yeah. I didn't know what you meant by can you take pressure off that? I'm like,
Pressure off the vessel itself.
No.
Yeah.
Leak on that male adapter.
Right.
My female adapter, I'm just spin on it.
Gotta something back out.
That's great.
yeah. Well, the good thing is we haven't seen a lot of those leaks until now we get one of your jobs going. Then we got to.
Yeah, well,
Right.
yeah, there you go.
So that's your recirc. So, you know, we do show a schematic here or a piping gurn and check valve required. So we give you this mixing valve, right? Cold water here, going to come past the flow sensor, and we're going to provide heat out to the hot port or hot tapping on the mixing valve. So I'm showing 140. But I gave you guys the example that we could see 180, right? If it's a 0 degree night, a 10 degree night, and during the evening, I've got 3-zone home. They've been running that heat exchanger, that potable indirect shell and tube design could be 180 degrees. Now it's first thing in the morning and someone gets up to go jump in the shower. And I could, instead of sending 140, I could be sending 180 out. So we definitely need that mixing valve, that anti-scald tempering valve out there, okay? And now, obviously, you blend that down for your showers, your faucets, your sinks, etc. And I think you guys get how a recirc line works, right? Or do I need to explain this? Recirculation. You guys get it? Right, I want to skip through it. All right, back to the terminal strip. So we've got main power. Now, depending on how we're going to control this, are we doing zone pumping or zone valves? Okay. So we're going to have a system pump and domestic recirculation pump, maybe. Okay. And I'll get into how we actually wire up the system pumps in a minute. You got your 24 volts we talked about. That is strictly for the additional low water cutoff that you have to add out in the field. And then your low water cutoff terminals, you would remove that jumper. We have something called HTT, which I'm going to come back to. Domestic recirc, if you're going to use your sensor, you're going to wire that up on that low voltage terminal. 0 to 10 inputs. Again, Tecmar, we're seeing about 25% of those here in New York with air controlling modulation. TT, right? That's your thermostat demand, or XX. And then lastly is your outdoor sensor. So you have outdoor reset on TT. Now, if you had, we give you an option here for a high temp zone, okay? Or the holiday mode, okay? And anytime this is closure, we're going to go to full fire. We're going to maintain 180, okay? And this is really designed for a smaller zone. Example of that, maybe there was an old porch that wasn't insulated. They finished it off through some baseboard heat out there, okay? And even if it's 50 degrees, there's no insulation on the floor, they want 180. Or maybe it was a garage and you throw a fan coil unit up inside there. And every time they're running it, they want 180. Anytime we have a TT closure on HTT, we will run full to 180 degrees. And all this one is showing is the heat only models where we've added the cascade terminals. and low temp and regular TT. All right. So what I want to show here. Yes.
They changed the AT&T one.
Yes.
It's only 100 hours now. It's only for the holiday. Or for after 100 hours, it ignores the call. It's easy past the call for 100 hours. It ignores the call. It's only for the holiday. No longer for a high temp zone. They have to.
Thank you. I saw the bulletin come out last week and I didn't read through it, so shame on me. I apologize.
Why would they do that?
Because they weren't using it.
It wasn't working correctly as a secondary high temperature zone, and it was originally designed just for the holidays where you can't turn the boiler on and turn the thing on and pull it off. So that's a double feature. After 100 hours of constant on, it times itself out. It's back to normal operation.
So like he's saying, like at a Florida room or front porch.
You have to do it off of
Regular
your
size.
TT.
off your SR panel. Put the network.
And that HTT was really designed for small zones, 50,000 BTUs or less. So I need to update this. It did come out last week, and I apologize. So what I'm showing here is zone valves. Okay. So example, Calefi or Tecmar. Okay. And down here is our terminal strip for the boiler. And then whatever zone panel you're using. In this example, I've got a TT demand, and we are going to close XX, which tells the boiler we have a demand. Now we have to fire or energize the pump. So what do? We energize the pump, all right, the system pump. And so I talked about modulation here if I've got a combi boiler. So if I hit 80% of modulation, I need to make sure I've got enough BTUs for my domestic demand. What we will do is we'll drop out that system pump. And as I now catch up and I start modulating back down to 50%, we reintroduce the pump. Okay. So that's how we're doing that. Now on zone pumping, we use ZC. So I'll use the exact same example here. I got a TT demand, I'm closing XX. I will then, we're only sending power off ZC to ZC on that control panel, which then energizes the pump or pumps. And again, as my boiler modulates up, depending on the demand, if I've got now a third zone or a second zone that come on plus my showers, and I get to 80% of modulation, I will de-energize that. Again, as now I'm catching up on my domestic demand, I drop down to 50% modulation, I'll re-energize it. Some of these zone panel manufacturers like Taco, they will have a jumper between ZC and ZR. You need to remove that jumper, okay? Because that is now 120 volts from ZR to ZC. Remove it, we want to be able to energize it. Any questions on that? Gentlemen, anything you want to add?
I think Lowe's the same way. I think Lowe's have to use the name of the DCT on terminal.
Yeah.
When you pretty well zone out, you also have a factory built up.
Calefi does not, right?
Calefi does not, because Calefi doesn't believe in anything oil. So back to Taco and back to Honeywell, that was the original triple active stack.
Okay.
That had the ZC and ZR.
Got it. Okay. Any questions on that? So that's how we're controlling the modulation, guys. All right. Programming, and again, the video is not going to work, but you already saw this. We have the power reset button, the mode buttons, domestic, faucet, etc. So I'm going to skip through that, and I'll show you where to gain access to these videos later on. So this product is ideal for either new or retrofit installations. It fits a nice niche, and especially with everything piped right off the top. Venting options here. So we are certified for all the vent material, but keep in mind, you guys are only certified here on your exhaust for polypropylene. Okay. No PVC, no CPVC. Combustion air intake, I think you could use cardboard if you wanted to. So combustion air intake doesn't matter, but your exhaust obviously does. Okay. You are limited to some fittings here. So let's talk about 2-inch. 2-inch venting is good for up to 50 feet. Okay. We are going to, on the 2-inch, deduct 8 foot for every elbow, 4 foot for every 45. Okay. 3-inch is good for 100 feet. Okay. In 3-inch vent, and then deduct 5 foot for every elbow, 2.5 for every 45. All right. So if you're going, don't forget, you know, if I've got 40 linear feet of exhaust and I have 4 fittings, all right, then that's 4 times 8. That's another 32, right? So instead of 40, I have 72. So don't just measure your linear pipe, okay? You got to calculate in your elbows. So in that example, go 3-inch, which would give you the 3-inch collar right off the top of these heaters, okay? So yes.
Is that a combined or an individual?
Individual, thank you. Each. Any questions? We've talked about the sidewall venting here, and vertical venting and the heat exchanger, etc. What's available for this, parts included, your outdoor sensor, your anti-scald valve, O-ring gasket kit. That comes with every heater. That even comes with the wall hung, okay? All of the gaskets, the fuse, the gas line gasket is there. We also have the 3-inch mesh screens, propane conversion. This is one of the easiest products to convert to market. This cover door is open right here. So this is a 140 model. I'm not going to move it, but again, each one's going to come shipped natural with an LP orifice. I'm going to loosen this fitting, take this fitting off. Don't forget there's a gasket behind here, okay? So otherwise it's going to drop down. But again, we give you the gasket kit with an extra one. Orifice goes in. I'm going to retighten it. I'm done. What's left is my dip switch. I got to throw my dip switch to the propane position. I can convert this in probably 3 minutes. All right. Very easy product to convert. But don't forget your combustion analysis, guys. We give you the 3-in-1 brass adapter, automatic vent, pressure relief, and the condensate hose. Okay. And that condensate hose, you don't have one handy. That condensate hose, you know what? When I get to the error codes, I'll show it then. Condensate hose is an orientation for it because we have a vacuum breaker right on it. Okay. So that wants to be in the up position. Keep in mind, the heat exchanger and down below, that condensate, if that vacuum breaker was facing down, I'm now going to dump condensate on the floor. All right. So we'll show you one of those as well. Anything you guys want to talk about that I might have missed before we get into error codes and other things?
Yes, on condensate.
On condensate.
If you are not going to be using a condensate hose and you're going to hard pipe it, that's fine and terrific, but make sure you provide a means of vent. So say you're going to use PVC, you'll see that it's going to create an issue because of no vent on the condensate, meaning way to vent the air out of that drain. Okay.
And that will hold condensate back to Ken's point, and we will trip that condensate pressure switch. I'm going to show that, what he's referring to. We have a picture of that on the next video or the next recording we do. And that would be on the 10 most common error codes. Any questions? Okay. Charlie, if you want to end that recording.